Mother's Day is almost here, and you can get her the most beautiful time-tested gift around. A watch she can wear every day from Movement. Whether your mom is into classic dress watches, rare and refined ceramics, or tried-and-true bestsellers, Movement has something she'll love. And right now, everything at Movement is up to 50% off site-wide during their Mother's Day sale. A watch is a gift that celebrates all the time you spent with mom. And a Movement watch is even more than that. Movement uses industry-leading materials for their fresh modern watch designs, from technically complex ceramics to vintage-inspired style, all for an incredible value your wrist and wallet will both love. And with one-size-fits-all convenience and fast free shipping and returns, it's a stress-free shopping experience. Save big on the best Mother's Day gift ever with Movement. Get up to 50% off site-wide during their Mother's Day sale at mvmt.com. Again, that's up to 50% off at mvmt.com.
We made this.
So, hello everyone, and welcome to We Are Starfleet, companion podcast to Star Trek Discovery, exploring the ethos and canon of the stories told within and without the mycelial network. We Are Starfleet is a part of the We Made This Podcast network, and you can find us online at WeMadeThisPod.com. I'm your host, Mike Slammer. With me, as always, is Mr. Ian Buckley, and I'm honored to be introducing today, joining us, Mr. Noah Averbach-Katz, well known to the Star Trek fandom as the Andorian Ryn.
Hello, you guys. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, to get to talk to you guys today. Happy to be here.
Well, yeah, first and foremost, thank you again for joining us on We Are Starfleet. You've been making the rounds on a lot of Star Trek-related publications and podcasts, especially now that Season 3 is wrapped. How does it feel to be taking your place in Star Trek history?
Oh, it just feels incredible. I think as a fan, you sort of have this, fantasy or dream of getting to talk about Star Trek and what you think and your opinions and them sort of mattering for some reason, even though they often don't. And so getting the chance to, talk about all these things I've been thinking about my entire life, and especially over the past year or over the past, couple of years, it's just been so much fun. And I also feel a real sense of responsibility to, participate with the fans, especially fans who are making something, who are creating something as much as possible, because in the most real sense, and on the sort of larger Star Trek sense, Star Trek wouldn't still be happening, and I certainly wouldn't be getting to do this without the fans who are, doing their small podcast that their little group of friends or their little community or their small fan base listen to, or making their own sort of home movie, fanfic movies. And so I just feel a real sense of responsibility to participate, to bring some visibility, to, share my experiences, the behind the scenes, the fun, the, what everybody's like on set, with not just, things that I love, like StarTrek.com or Trek Report or whatever, the bigger Star Trek or general, bigger publications, which are awesome and I love and happy to do those as well, but also kind of spread that love around to just all the fans who have kind of stuck around and who are participating. So it's been really, really, gratifying and rewarding to get to make the rounds. And, people will be sick of it, but it will be over soon. I only have so many stories, so everyone can suffer for a little bit longer.
Well, we will suffer happily. Can you tell us a little bit about how you landed the role of Ryn?
Absolutely. So for those who don't know, which is probably nobody listening at this point, my wife is Mary Wiseman, who of course plays Sylvia Tilly on Discovery. And the way it happened was very early on, when she first started shooting, I came up to visit her super early on in season 1, and it was right around the time when they were doing the first episode of what was it called now? It's not called The Ready Room. That's Will's show. It was called After Trek. That's what it's called. Thank you. I don't know why I forgot that. I totally brain farted for a moment. It was the first episode of After Trek, which they were actually shooting remotely in Toronto. And I was just happened to be up there, and it was the first real time I had like been on set and met everybody. And then we all went out afterwards and like went, all hopped in this van and went over to this live shooting of After Trek. And, everybody, all the cast members, including Mary, were kind of working and they were sort of on, so I was sort of just like looking around for somebody to talk to and hang out and be excited with. And I wound up sitting next to Akiva Goldsmith, who was a producer for season 1. And I was sort of, saying like, isn't this cool? And then we sort of talking about our shared love of Trek, because obviously like he's been around the Trek world forever. And I started showing him pictures of my phone of me in uniform in 1999. And he started showing me pictures on his phone of him in uniform in like 88. And so we were really, couldn't believe that we were both here, I mean, it was so fun talking with Akiva too, because he had worked on the movies, the JJ movies, and had been, hugely instrumental of kind of getting of the launch of Discovery and of, now, Picard and Lower Decks and everything. He's so involved, but he was still like so excited to like get to see the set or get to be involved in any way. And so we were just like totally sort of, bonding over our shared excitement of getting to be next to Star Trek actors, even though like he was a producer and I was married to one. We were still totally geeks about it. And, he was like, oh, we've got to like get you, we've got to get you like as an extra, we'll throw a costume. And I was like, oh, absolutely. Hell yes. We're like absolutely doing this. And we were just like totally, talking, whatever. And we went over to like this after party sort of for the first episode. I don't know, and we were all sitting around a table eating hors d'oeuvres or whatever. And we were going back and forth and talking blah, blah, blah. And Akiva was like, look, like, if you want to be on the show, like, here's the guy you need to talk to. He sort of motioned across the table to Alex Kurtzman. And I was like, immediately honed in on him. It was a very, I think like Mary might even came up to talk to me. I was like sort of, pitching my Star Trek fandom to Alex. And it was a very, Wesley Guinan moment where Riker's sort of doing like your eyes are like the 1,000 stars, and Mary came up to me and I was like, quiet, I'm working here, but it was great because, for Alex, he was so excited by somebody being excited about the thing he was doing, and so it wasn't, kind of like weird, pitchy, networky. It was just like, look, like, I love this thing. I'm so excited by this thing. I just saw the first episode and I was totally jazzed. Here's what I loved, blah, blah, blah. And as I was talking to him, somebody from CBS came up to me and was like, hey, do I know you? Like, do I know you from something? I was like, well, nobody knows me. I'm not anyone. I'm, that person's husband who you don't even really know yet. So like, no. And she's like, no, I do. And she's like, oh, that's right. You were on an episode of The Good Fight, that aired probably, 6 months prior. And sort of in that moment, Alex sort of saw me as not just like an excited husband who was an actor, but as like a real actor who had like gone to Juilliard and had been on CBS All Access before Mary had. And so from there, I sort of like was on his radar. I auditioned for Spock a year later, which was super, super fun just to get to do. It was, kind of ironically the code name. It was an Andorian named Tom. And I was reading it and I was like, this is not an Andorian. This is a Vulcan. Like, don't even fucking play with me right now. And I was like, and I'm basically like 99% sure that this is Spock. And it was just such a fun audition to do because it was very, very difficult audition sides in terms of for somebody who would have no idea what this was. It was Spock sort of, reintroducing himself to Michael. And then the second side, which was really difficult, was him sort of losing his mind about Alice in Wonderland. And that's a really difficult side to do, when you're supposed to like not be emotionless. But for somebody who knows the genre so well, like we do, it would just felt so natural. And sort of when you read it on the page, it was like some rambling, but when you spoke it as a Vulcan, it just made total sense. And so it was just so much fun to do. And it was the audition was received really well, and thank God that Ethan is playing Spock and not me, because in my year between filming and premiering, like I started like waking up in the middle of the night, like shooting out of bed, being like, was that one line Andorian enough, you know, and like in a cold sweat. And so I can't imagine the terror I would be experiencing basically every second of my life if I was like, was that Spock enough? I think I would be dead by now. And Ethan is like, you know, I got to watch Ethan work on set, and he's so amazing. He's so perfect for the part. His voice is just like this sort of low, you know, everyone on set, when he kind of drops into Spock, is just like, that's it. So I'm just couldn't be happier about that casting choice and about, you know, what a good dude Ethan is. But, you know, this sort of led to this other audition, which sort of just got sent my way. I was at the very beginning of season 3. You know, they had already shot in Iceland, and we'd gone there and hung out. And I was living in Toronto with Mary, and I flew back to New York, did this audition at CBS, which again, you know, it's so interesting when you know this genre so well, because on the page, like if you didn't know it, it'd be like, well, like this guy is in a thing, and there's like, who's Mr. Cardassian? Like, I don't understand, you know, this doesn't make sense. But for me, it was like, I didn't have to do any work. It was like my imagination was fully loaded. I knew which part of Deep Space Nine I was imagining myself in, and, you know, what the Cardassian captive who I was trying to help escape is in these sides that, you know, they sent me. And so it just felt so right and so familiar that it was just so much fun. And I flew back to Toronto, and, you know, I don't really remember the process of getting the part. It was just like, oh, well, now I like need to go in for like makeup tests and figure out, you know, what I'm supposed to do now. And that was sort of the saga of getting cast on the show. Wow. That's an info dump.
That's amazing. I love that.
I told you I wouldn't shut up. I told you, I was like, oh my God.
No, please don't. What was it like being such a blue dyed-in-the-wool Trekkie to step on to this set as a character for the first time?
Yeah, you went from being a fan to being in the fandom.
Yeah, you know, it's great. You know, it's great. And it's this interesting thing, because it wasn't like I went from 0 to 60, you know, because I had been on set for 2.5 years. I knew everybody knew me, everybody had seen the pictures. So it almost felt like ceremonial in a way, where it was like when I came on set in the makeup, in the costume, everyone was like, you're doing it, Noah, like you've done it. Yeah. You know, it's like, go stand over there. Like, can you believe it? You know, so it felt very celebratory. And exciting, and everyone was excited for me. And, you know, on set, I just think there is, you know, when things are going well, there is a vibe of like, we're making this really cool thing that has this amazing history, and each of us is kind of adding to it. And when somebody sort of steps on that, brings that attitude back to the forefront, you know, of like, we're doing something exciting and unique and for posterity, I think everybody gets really, really pumped up. So it was awesome. And it also feels, you know, since the show has actually come out, it's just been an amazing experience to, I don't know, feel like I'm sort of can be, if you so choose, that sort of bridge between behind the scenes and the fandom, you know, because I really have been on both sides. You know, I've been at a convention, I've heard the stories multiple times, and I've also like been on set and like, you know, made the thing as well. So I just feel, you know, really, really lucky to be in this really, really unique position, because, I feel like in 10 or 15 or 20 years, you'll have people with their cosplay pictures who are now on the show that they love. There'll be kids in their Iron Man suits who now are on Iron Man. But like, in the 90s, in the late 90s, or in the early aughts, like how many things, cosplay didn't exist. There was no such word as cosplay, really. There was, dressing up for a Star Trek convention. There was going in uniform, so like how many people have pictures of themselves in costume at the thing that they love, when they're a kid. Like it's just such a unique experience that really, for me and for I think like, sort of pop culture in general, like could have only happened for Star Trek. Maybe there's like one or two other things where it's like, if you really loved The Tick in 1995 and you got to be on the show, you know what I mean? It's like even for things where, people would cosplay or whatever, like, I don't know, Buffy or whatever, things of that era in the 90s, it's like, well, it hasn't been rebooted. There's no chance for you to kind of come back and step in the same way. So it's just such a unique experience, and I just feel really lucky, and it just exceeded all of my expectations too, which is amazing because it really could have sucked. I could have gotten on set and I could have had a bad time, and I could have not gotten along with the director, or, I could have not liked the character I was playing, whatever, obviously I was sort of inclined to like it, of course, but it could have sucked and totally sort of colored my relation.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Relationship to Star Trek in general too.
Sure. In one of your previous interviews, I saw that you were almost afraid of kind of meeting your heroes. Like one of those moments where you're like, I want to, but also.
Right. Well, it applies to like Star Trek in general, where it's like pulling back the curtain, and then it's, this house of lies and everything sucks. And it's like, ugh. And now I look back at these old shows that I love, and I just sort of see them with this, with this filter on, but also that, directly applied to Jonathan Frakes, where, he directed 2 of my episodes. And so there was this feeling of like, God, I hope he's not an asshole, God, like, even if he's not an asshole, God, I hope he just doesn't look at me and, say something crappy. And then for the rest of my life, it's like, that's my relationship. And I just, it's not pure luck, because Jonathan is obviously an amazing guy and everybody loves him, and for good reason. But there is a sense of luck and just gratefulness that it wasn't like that. And in fact, it was, it was absolutely the opposite, where I just had an amazing time, and Jonathan was amazing, and he was so nice to me, and, he gets along so well with Mary. I just couldn't have hoped for anything better.
Wow. I had an opportunity to meet Jonathan Frakes on set at CBS in New York, and same experience. It was so amazing. I was so nervous about it, like going into it. Don't fuck this up. Don't fuck this up. Be good. And the whole thing, they made it so smooth, so easy. Like, it was like coming home.
Yeah. It really does feel like, I know this world so well. It's not like I'm having to work really hard to convince myself, like, believe it, this is a TV show. It's kind of the opposite, where it's like you kind of have to convince yourself that it's not real and to chill out just a little bit.
Wow. So besides what you brought to Ryn through your performance, did you influence the creation of the character at all, or did the writers and creators kind of have like a clear vision of where they were going to take that?
That's a good question. In terms of the writing, I made a decision early on. Again, it's like knowing Star Trek so well. I knew this guy was going to die from right off the bat. I was like, he's dead. You're dead. Everyone was like, no, he'll stick around. It's like, nobody can convince me otherwise. I know Star Trek too well. He'll have a good death, but he's gonna die. And I need to accept that now. But I also made this decision to not sort of get super involved in like what his story was going to be or what was going to happen to him, especially because so much of his, for two reasons, so much of his story is like of the moment, he doesn't have a big secret that he's sort of leading up to, he's not Osiris Spy. He's not, some shapeshifter who's got this big secret. So it's very much like he was who he was in that moment. And so, both as an actor and as a fan, I really didn't want to know what was going to happen to him, because I knew if I was thinking about his death an episode before, my performance would suffer. I just wouldn't be as focused. I wouldn't be as into it. I wouldn't be as sort of just completely invested in this moment, because I was going to be so disappointed that he was going to die. And as the actor, it just felt like he's just in the moment. There's no big reveal that I need to sort of build up to. I just need to play this guy as he is in this moment, as he sort of grows and learns and changes moment to moment.
And on that note, how much of Jeffrey Combs' Andorian Ryn did you take from?
Such a good question. I watched all of his episodes. It was an interesting challenge, because obviously the way that I consider it is that Jeffrey has created the identity of what an Andorian is. Mm-hmm. Like, that's sort of how I approach it. This sort of bombastic, confident, brash creature, which are so distinct. They're so distinct from a Klingon. The sort of aggressiveness of a Klingon is so different from the aggressiveness of an Andorian. And I really credit not just the writing, but his performance is the thing that's creating that. So, it was a challenge, because obviously Ryn is not like that. He can't afford to be, because he's sort of, we meet him after the fact. We meet him after he's sort of spent his sort of confident Andorian capital trying to take down this, horrible, violent, manipulative mob boss, and it's failed. So we sort of meet him at the end of that journey. And for a while, I was really trying to figure out, how can I make sure that he's an Andorian while still, meeting the needs of the script and of this character. And I was thinking a lot about, Star Trek species in general, and how to sort of approach them holistically and as an actor, and I thought a lot about, to me, it seems like each species has something they're presenting and something they're covering, which is very, an actor thing as well. And I thought, Klingons sort of present this violent, aggressive bloodlust, but really they're sort of covering this deep sense of honor and loyalty and tradition. And humans sort of actually are really, they sort of represent like these Federation ideals of justice and truth and doing the right thing, but really they're kind of covering their greed and power and their sort of, inner turmoil. Yeah. And I think, Vulcans are like the clearest of that, where it's like they're sort of presenting logic, but really they're just covering their pure animalistic whatever. And I thought a lot about Andorians and how they do that, and this sort of presenting this brash, confident, Shran when we first meet him, But as he sort of progresses through Enterprise, slowly those trappings are pulled away as his mate dies, as his daughter is kidnapped. And you really see like a deeply felt, sensitive, filled with like hurt and pain and loss. So, this brash trapping, outside presentation is really covering just some really, really deeply felt emotions. And my thought was to sort of, we meet Ryn when he's at the end of Shran's journey. So it's almost like this sort of reverse journey. So we meet him when he's just sort of like feeling this like deep sense of loss and hurt and feeling trapped, and his journey is almost building back up and finding his Andorian confidence, finding his swagger again. That's sort of, you can see him in the second episode when he's like, where's the captain? And then immediately he's kind of like knocked to the side by Tilly, in such a great scene. But, he doesn't quite have it yet. And I think what's so great for me, at least, is that seems like this final moment of him sort of standing up to Osira. Nobody on that ship except for maybe Zara knows Osira better. He knows he's going to really suffer the consequences, probably die if he says no to this person. But he has sort of finally found his confidence again, his swagger, and looking at this person in the eye while they hold a gun to his face and just say like, yeah, you're kind of a loser actually, and I see right through you. Is sort of the capstone on his journey to like be finding his true, Andorian confidence again.
Wow. I definitely, felt that loss when Osira pulled that trigger, man. So kudos to you because you brought that.
Good.
It was a real moment.
It was sad. Obviously no actor wants to see their character die, but watching the season and watching that episode, that scene with Vance and Osira, Janet and Oded play it so brilliantly. And both of them sort of feel like, you don't really completely trust Oded in that moment. You really feel like he's angling for something, which I think is brilliantly played because he is. But you leave that being like, man, maybe Osira, I'm not sure. And then you really see who she really is, which is somebody when she's frustrated or upset or angry, takes her anger out on the nearest target. And I think that really paints her as the villain that she is, and the villain that, you kind of get these hints of with Quajon, and even with Ryn's antennae being gone, that sort of like solidifies it. So that way when when she gets shot in the face in the next episode, you're just like, no, that's satisfying. That feels good. And you're not conflicted about it in a way that I don't think would be satisfying.
That's great. I love that. The end of season 3 kind of hits a bit of a reset button, in terms of like the story. Now we're sort of settled in terms of like who's crewing the ship, at least for the beginning of season 4. And yeah, like just as a fan, where do you hope Discovery takes us in the coming seasons? I mean, I'm sure you know what's going on in season 4 to a greater or lesser degree.
Less than you might think.
I'm sure they're keeping a lid on some stuff.
Well, yeah. I could read all the scripts. It's not because I can't. It's because I early on, season 1 and early into season 2, I would make Mary tell me everything. I would read all the scripts, and I actually found like it diminished my enjoyment of actually watching the show, because I was sort of like, are they going to do this? How are they going to approach this? Oh, I would have done it this way. And it was just not as enjoyable. And also I couldn't give Mary sort of an outside eye of like how a Star Trek fan is actually watching this show, which I think is so important, because when you make the show, it almost feels like these different chunks just sort of put next to each other, because you were there that day and then you have no idea what this day was like, and then you were there the next day. And so I feel like having, a real Star Trek fan watch the show and say, this is how a Star Trek fan is probably interpreting this moment, which is different than how it may have felt on set, I think is really valuable. And I feel really lucky to get to watch it as a fan. I get really, pun intended, the best of both worlds, where I get to have a general idea of what's coming, of what's going to happen. And, also, not also get to watch it just as a fan and just have that sense of enjoyment and excitement and surprise. You know, I hadn't read the season finale, and all of it was a surprise to me, and it was just so much fun, you know, that is so cool to like get to be in the previous episode, you know, and then watch the next episode and be surprised about what happens. It's just so much fun. And in terms of season 4, you know, I'm really, you know, I don't really care story-wise, you know. I have a lot of confidence that it will be fun and it will be discovery and it will be great. I'm most interested, you know, there's been a lot of turnover in Discovery all the way back to Brian Fuller, you know. And I think, you know, for the first time in the show, like, you know, they have a showrunner. You know, Michelle Paradise is completely at the helm at the beginning of this season. She's not sort of tying up loose ends from, you know, a transfer and somebody else's idea. You know, this is her show now. It's her writers, it's her staff. And of course, Alex has been there sort of guiding the ship, but he sort of has done such an amazing job creating such a huge universe that I think it's just really nice to be able to like hand it to somebody and not sort of feel like I'm still trying to figure out, you know, who Saru is based on these other people who kind of handed him to me and stuff like that. So I'm sort of just most excited for her and her team to really feel like it's their show now.
Sure. That makes sense. Is there something that as a fan you'd like to see on screen either in this show or any of the other Star Trek shows?
Gosh, what would I like to see on screen? I don't know. You know, I've been happy and surprised. I think I would like to see more LeVar Burton. You know, I think like honestly, like they've done such a good job sort of bringing people back. I just think like LeVar, the kind of living legend, he's kind of is due. You know what I mean? So if I were going to say like one thing, if I want to turn on my, you know, Star Trek show, you know, flip through and just put on whatever it might be, Picard or Strange New Worlds or Section 31 or, you know, the new show on Nickelodeon, I think I would want to turn it on and see LeVar.
I feel like he's definitely going to have his due. He's really come up in the past few years working on like children's books and children's shows and everything, and he just seems like the perfect fit, especially to jump in on the new Nickelodeon show. Yeah,
I agree. I just think, and he's, you know, he's such a legend, you know, just in terms of pop culture and everything. So I just think it's past due as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, somewhat related, you know, much of the theme surrounding season 3 has been reconnecting, building, and strengthening either those broken or decaying bonds. How much did you feel like that was intentional, considering our modern socio-political era? Not to get off too much of on a tangent, but feel free.
It's such a great question because, you know, season 1 premiered like you can look it up. It was either like October or like January 2016. You know what I mean? So they had like sort of made this show coming out of the Obama era, looking forward to the Hillary era, and it was like, uh-oh, you know, like, wait a second, things have changed.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, you know, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Really fast.
Dramatically.
And we have this show that is sort of, you know, always sort of connected to the socio-political climate. And not only has it changed so fast, but we, meaning everybody, you know, doesn't even know what that is yet. And so there was a lot, you know, it sort of had to like really spin on a dime, and also got its bell rung because I think media in general, pop culture in general, is, you know, trying to figure out, you know, what this era was. And so I think this is the first show that really, you know, like you said, is able to speak to this time, because, you know, everybody has a better idea of what it is. It's also such a difficult task, because in the 90s, it was like, you know, are drugs bad? Like, you know, it was a lot of like morality question. It's like, is it okay to be gay? You know, and there were people on the show who are like, no, you know what I mean? And now, like, we don't need morality plays right now. You know what I mean? I just don't think like the discourse is about morality plays when it's like, you know, is fascism bad?
Yes.
Yeah, we don't need a morality play. You know,
right.
We don't like, we know the answers to the questions in a way that, you know, in the 90s, in the early 90s, you know, we're still sort of discussing. It's like, can women have it all? It's like, we're past that, guys. Like, we can't keep, you know, hashing out, you know, these questions. And I think, you know, particularly introducing Blue and this non-binary character, Adira, I think, you know, the way that they handled that, which was like, not like, oh, you know, like, two trills is if like two women kiss each other, but it's really a man kissing a woman. That's okay, right? It's like, no, like, it's they, them, end of story. We're moving on. Like, that's how we deal with it in actually the present. You know, that's sort of the motto we want to set, is that somebody tells you who they are and then we respond to it appropriately. So, you know, in terms of that, I've been really, really happy. And I also think, you know, it's lined up really nicely where you sort of have this tattered aftermath of the Federation. You know, you really have like, I really think a lot about the end of the season when Vance is like, yeah, my wife and kids are somewhere else. And just like the level of sort of, shambles it's in, you know, he's not living with his family. He's sort of had to sacrifice everything to try to keep this ideal alive. And it's not going super well. I mean, it is now. It's getting better, but you know, the level of desperation that he has trying to, you know, pin Osira in 312 is indicative of how bad things are, you know, how badly he kind of needs this win. You know, he doesn't really actually have a very strong position to stand from. He doesn't, you know, he can't really get Osira to like do what he wants unless she acquiesces, which is, you know, not a great position to work from. And so I think that sort of this idea of, you know, people who have seen that things can be better, who believe that things can be better, and who are willing to like make really, really tough decisions and tough calls, and who are willing to kind of put themselves on the line to try and make things better. I think that is a really exciting way to sort of tie up season 3 and move into season 4. You know, of course, the symbolism of like, you know, the way that whole bridge looks, not just Michael in the chair, but the whole bridge sort of is so diverse and representing such an amazing diversity. I think that symbolism is amazing. So I think there's just a lot of good things happening that is sort of finally catching up to what we have to do in this time, post, 2 days from now, January 20th. So I do think it sort of is actually just hitting this perfect time of like, how do we rebuild? What do we take with us and what do we leave behind? So I'm just really excited about that.
Yeah, I couldn't help but also think, especially surrounding Su'Kal's story and the isolation and the depression that results and the fear and the anxiety that can come about, and just how on brand for this past year that is. And it's like, is art imitating life? Is life imitating art? At what point do we?
It's great because that's all done in 2019. He's
afraid to go outside. He has no idea.
Exactly. Like you're with him and you're like, man, I could use a freaking holodeck program these days. So it worked out really well in that way too, definitely.
So are there any great behind the scenes stories that you'd like to share? Like maybe sharing the screen with David Ajala, or maybe one of those pivotal scenes when Michael is breaking you guys out of the prison planet,
hanging out with the cat.
There's a lot, it was so great, I mean, I think like my favorite, it's not a great behind the scenes thing, but it really just kind of gives an idea of where I was at. It's my first day of shooting. Very first time I like had the full makeup on. That was like sort of the finished makeup after the tests. My first day of shooting was the very end of the first episode when I'm just laying in this medical bed, completely, knocked out after getting shot. And I couldn't believe it. Just felt like there were so many like Star Trek things that I sort of wanted to like check off my list, which was get beamed up and get shot. And even the small thing of like, as I'm beamed up, I get to beam up while running. And then since I'm shot, I get to bang into a wall. Banging into a wall just feels like so Star Trek, cause you're beaming up and you don't know where the wall is and you just hit it. And getting to be in sickbay with one of those silvery space blankets on in a little space wrap with, the stuff above me with all my vitals going on. It just felt like such a Star Trek thing. It was such a great way to start out, checking this thing off my list. I just think back to like Next Gen where they're in their purple space blankets and there's the thing over their head that's, supposed to be telling them. And I was looking at the monitor and it's like, those monitors are all like LCD screens. So like they're live in the moment. So there's like all the Andorian physiology is there. And it was just, I just couldn't believe it. And my only job was to sit there and just be asleep. And, David and Sonequa, I know Sonequa very, very well and we're very close and I love her and she's so amazing and she was so excited for me as well, So David and Sonequa are there and they go in to do a rehearsal, they're sort of practicing their lines, how they're going to do it, where they're going to stand. The director's working with them and all right, we'll do a run through before we shoot. And so David and Sonequa are kind of delivering those lines. It's going to be okay, yada, yada. And they turn and walk away. And I'm sitting there and my eyes are wide open. I'm staring at them and I'm just smiling. I'm just like, wow, like I'm watching, like it was like I'm watching them do it and I'm on the bed and I'm looking up and smiling and sort of nodding along with them. And, they do the thing and Sonequa very, very kindly comes over to me and was like, so are you supposed to like have your eyes open during this moment? Like, is that what the director told you to do? Cause like, are you asleep or are you listening? Like, I'm just curious, very, very kindly. And in that moment I was like, oh, like I have to like do a good job acting now. Like I can't just like show up and be like, I did it. I'm here. I actually have to act. And so I had to like really jam my eye shut and smash my mouth closed because I just wanted to kind of keep looking around and staring and smiling and being happy. So I thought that was very indicative of my experience getting to be on set and doing that.
All right. Like, whether that is a great behind the scenes story, actually. So maybe not the most technically interesting, but yes. That is awesome.
Yeah, you got to imagine it's a little challenging to stay present when you're in a scene on a Star Trek show and you've got these fantastic actors just working around you.
You know, it's so funny because that was like my first day on set. And it was so hard to just like stay focused and be in the moment and not sort of fan out. And then my second day on set, we did on location. We had to drive super early in the morning to this steel factory called Stelco in Hamilton. It was like this insane building and all these pipes and everything. And they were like, you know, they found me, and it was like my first time, you know, being on my feet and walking around and even just getting a sense of the prosthetic and everything. They're like, okay, so like we have 40 extras behind you. You need to lead them all out over this gravel hill. And then once you get to the gravel hill, don't get too close to this area because there's going to be a massive explosion. And so if you get too close, the plastic's going to the rubber will melt to your face and it will be really bad. And the contacts will melt in your eyes. So don't get too close to that. And then come to this here, hit this gravel thing, wait for this explosion. And then once that explosion goes off, run through it, but you can't go too early because again, if it explodes on you, you'll just like become blue forever. And then run to the end of this thing and then jump and get shot. Okay, like here we go. And so it was like, you know, it was so funny because it was like the first day I had to focus so hard, and the second day it took nothing for me to get into it because it was like, you know, the scene is like don't get blown up, and so all I had to focus on, you know, was like just don't get blown up. Don't let anybody else get blown up, and like the acting will be there, you know, as long as you just focus on not, you know, dying in real life.
How long did it take to put all the makeup on?
When we started, you know, I had this Andorian stubble, and the way that they had to apply that was strand by strand, gluing it onto the face. And there were these long strands, like 3 inches long, and they had to cut them up to my face. So that added quite a bit of time. And also, you know, the actual mask itself, it's just sort of like blue rubber. It doesn't really, it looks like a Halloween mask. And so the real texture and personality you get is from hand painting it, whether that's with brushes or with, you know, kind of a spray to give layers of texture to it. So early on, while they were still kind of getting, you know, figuring out the best way to paint it, you know, do this first or that first or whatever, it took about 5.5 hours to get that makeup on. And then by the time that they kind of figured out, they got rid of the beard because it took way too long. It came down to about 3.5.
I'd imagine you definitely wouldn't want that melting all over you then. Yeah.
No way.
No,
I didn't even
nor
want
those
to be blue for
contacts.
life. Yeah, exactly.
No thanks. So as someone who's got a couple of campaigns going right now, I have to ask you about the D&D you were playing with the cast. How did that get started?
So, gosh, how did it get started? You know, Mary might have seen on Twitter that Anthony had posted that he was playing, and Blue was interested and had something, you know. But I had thought about starting something season 3, but it didn't work out because after I finished shooting season 3, I was doing a play, and so I was in Baltimore, so I couldn't do it. But I had found that, you know, D&D during COVID was just such an amazing way to stay connected to people and tell new stories with people and get to know new people, sort of outside just, you know, having a Zoom martini, which after the second or third time you just sort of want to smash your face through the computer. So, you know, Anthony, there was like these off-season Zooms of checking in with the cast, and at the end of these Zooms, Anthony would be like, "Oh, Noah's running a D&D campaign too," and I was like, "Okay, I guess I'm doing that." And then there was a text chain, and Blue was like, you know, "Hey, maybe we can do this," and I also nominate Noah to do it, and so I was like, "Well, yeah, I guess that's happening." So, you know, I just sort of sent the big mass email out, and everyone who replied to that email is kind of in this game currently. And it's just been a really good way to get to know people who I already knew better, like, Anthony and Emily, and also get to know Blue and Ian, who I didn't really know at all before this year. Get to know them really well, and it's just been a real gift to kind of have that place where we can all hang out and connect and have sort of a group story and not sort of talk about work.
Wow. One of our We Made This Network colleagues, he specifically wanted us to ask you, did you ever play any of the adventure books such as Warlock of Firetop Mountain by the great adventure book writers Livingstone and Jackson?
I have not played those books. I'm relatively new to D&D. Like, I'm not an old hat in it. There's no pictures of me when I'm, 12 rolling dice. So I haven't, played a huge amount, especially outside of the sort of source books. I've done a lot of the different modules that Wizards has put out, but I haven't sort of like expanded too far out, into sort of other written campaigns and stuff. So I haven't checked that one out. But if he wants to send me a copy, I will definitely read it. That's for sure.
All right. I will, that question came from our friend Luke Winch.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
He's definitely, I guess he's a D&D guy, because I have no idea what Warlock of Firetop Mountain is or who Livingstone and Jackson is. That's really cool. I've always been like tacitly interested in D&D, and it seems like it's the perfect activity for, as I gesture wildly at everything.
Yeah. Absolutely. It definitely is a really good thing for these days.
Yeah, COVID's what got me back into it for sure.
So outside of Star Trek, outside of D&D, what are you watching? Are you playing anything? Are you binging something? Have you and Mary watched Bridgerton together?
You watch Bridgerton alone. I don't actually really watch a lot of TV. I don't watch a lot of movies. We've been watching The Simpsons. I feel like it's all comfort food these days. You kind of are going back to the things that you felt, gave you that sort of sense of warmth and safety and, home. So we've been watching The Simpsons together. But really I don't really consume that much media outside of Star Trek and D&D. I'm sort of get laser focused on something. So it's just like, tearing through, or not anymore tearing through, but just, Critical Role or NADPOD or Adventure Zone, all those kind of classic D&D stuffs. And also just sort of reading as much as I can and really just, spending the time, the 3 or 4 hours that I might do, watching a movie or a show, just playing different campaigns with my friends, So I DM the one for Star Trek, and then I play in 2 different campaigns with different friends, which is just awesome.
Wow. So tell us a bit about the work you've been doing online with Insulin for All and Type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, a fellow podcaster and sort of graphic designer saw that I had Insulin for All in my Twitter bio and just sort of made this kind of awesome graphic. And I was sort of thinking, what can I do with this? It's so cool. And I would love to sort of, now that I have just this tiny little sliver of visibility, make it count for something other than just like I like Star Trek, which is plenty enough, but it'd be nice to do a little bit more. And I reached out to an organization called Type 1 International that I really like because they're focused in the United States, but also outside the United States. They're really, smartly targeting, advocacy, legislation, and availability. They also, they're a smaller organization because they don't have they don't take pharmaceutical money, which allows them to really focus on, insulin for all in a way that is, not clouded by, big money or big pharma. They also, the donations are really important. It's really a volunteer grassroots organization. So, raising money for them in a way that, a company with a $200 million operating, budget, it doesn't make a difference. But for this company, it makes a huge difference. For this charity, it makes a huge difference. So I just they had sort of an open campaign that I made, my own little version of fundraising for, and kind of just sort of put that call out to the Star Trek community, and was just so honored by the response. We raised over $4,500, which for this little organization was a huge amount of money, especially in COVID times when it's so hard to, get any kind of support or get people together. It just made a huge difference. And I think it also made a huge morale difference as well, to see that they just weren't operating in a vacuum, that there was people looking out for them. And it also just I've just received so many messages about, type 1 can be a bit of an isolating experience because there's enough to make it a huge issue, but not necessarily always a great place to find community or find people who are going through similar things that you are. So having a ton of people just reach out and appreciative to kind of say, hey, thank you for putting this in the forefront. Thank you. I feel really seen. I sort of know this experience. I feel like, I just really appreciated it. So it was just a really, really fantastic thing on all fronts. And even people who, couldn't afford to give money, which of course right now is totally understandable. The gusto with which the Star Trek community just shared and pushed it forward, thousands of times was just massive and helps push this organization and this issue, not just, fiscally to the forefront, which is great, but also sort of in the front of people's minds, which makes a huge, huge difference as well. And so, it's just been great. And I'm hoping, some other fans have sort of reached out and said hey, we are fabricators, we're 3D printers, we're designers, we're going to design some of the, almost a 3D version of the sort of comm badge image that was given to me. So, those are sort of making their way to me from different parts of the world and the country. And I'm going to get my hands on those and look at them and be like, what the hell am I going to do with these? I don't know anything about creating a fundraising website or anything like that, but I'm just really looking forward to it. And I think, it'll just give me a chance to kind of raise some more money and kind of do another round of this, and with some material goods as well. I just think it's going to be really awesome. So keep an eye out for that. It'll probably be a couple months, but I'm really looking forward to it.
That sounds great. And what's the name of that organization you've been raising money for? It's
called Type 1 International.
Type 1 International. Is that T1 International?
Yes, exactly.
.org?
I think so. If you just put in that, Insulin for All, it'll kind of bring you that way. And or you can just kind of keep an eye out on my Twitter page, and it'll pop up sooner or later.
Perfect. Thank you.
So what's next for you? What do you got on deck?
Gosh, it's really this, and Anthony and I have been working really hard to do a live stream charity one shot of our D&D game. We kind of are still working out the details of that, but that's kind of the big thing that I've been working on and pushing on. Acting wise, it's a little slow with COVID and being in Toronto, and so there's nothing that direction. But I do think that this between these two fundraisers, it'll keep me really busy, and I think it'll be really exciting, and it'll be a fun event for people to kind of, stick their head into our silly home game and maybe a chance to raise some decent money for a cool organization.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'll definitely tune in for that.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Noah, thank you. I feel a little flubbered here, but thank you. It was an absolute treat to chat with you today. Fan to fan to actor, whatever it be. But, so final question here before we close out. What's your favorite captain's catchphrase? What would yours be? What would Ryn's catchphrase be?
Gosh, my favorite captain catchphrase, It's probably Make It So. I know that's not original, but it's just can't
timeless.
be. Yeah, it can't really be topped. I was talking with somebody else, and we were talking about other final words that Ryn could have said, or maybe it was like, sort of the sentiment behind his sort of last stand, which was like, Osira, you're nothing, you're just a bully, and, you can go eat shit. So I think Ryn's catchphrase would be something like, Osira, you can eat shit, and, then shoot off into the distance. I don't know how good eat shit is for a launching thing, but you know what? I stand by it, and I'm
maybe it sounds better in Andorian.
There you go. Maybe there's an Andorian opera that can cover that subject.
Something gets lost in translation there. Noah, thank you. Appreciate your time, man.
Thanks so much, Noah. This was a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's been awesome.
Hope you've all enjoyed this episode of We Are Starfleet, a podcast on the We Made This Pod network. We recently launched a network-wide Patreon to help support our team of podcast creators. You'll hear a clip coming up shortly describing what and how you can support us in our creative endeavors. In addition, if you'd like to support me in the show directly and would like to buy me a coffee, you can find that link in the show description as well. Hosting a podcast is more than just being our own editorial team and sound engineer. It's also doing PR and marketing, constantly reaching out for special guests, and of course, actually creating the content. So if you like what you've heard here and you've been enjoying the show and want to encourage us to do more, please consider throwing us a bone. And if you don't want to, that's okay too. You can also support us by dropping a 5-star rating on your podcasting platform, which is one of the best ways for us to get that sweet, sweet dopamine kick. If you're really keen, write us a review. Either way, we absolutely appreciate you tuning in week after week. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at StarfleetPod for updates and show releases, chat Trek, or maybe tell us what you'd like to hear an episode about. Maybe you'd like to be a guest. Thanks again, everyone. Stay tuned to hear more about what's coming up on the We Made This network.
Hello, everyone. This is Tony, Network Chief of We Made This. As you know, our podcast network brings together a brilliant assortment of talent who talk about all kinds of pop culture content, such as the episode you just listened to, or maybe you're just about to listen to. We're not going anywhere, but we'd love to keep the lights on for even longer if you're able to support our network on Patreon. For just £2 a month, you get your name in lights and the satisfaction of knowing you're helping us produce more great audio. And for £3 a month, you'll get your name in lights, but you'll also get access to an exclusive bi-monthly podcast from the We Made This talent pool on podcasting, pop culture, and, well, you tell us. We'll take your suggestions. For less than the price of a coffee per month, you can help keep We Made This going. Just head to patreon.com/We Made This. That's patreon.com/We Made This. And get the ball rolling. Now, back to your scheduled programming. Elsewhere on We Made This. Cerebral Jukebox.
I think as I've got older, I don't care what people think of my music taste anymore. I'm happy to admit that, I really missed the boat because, in the 2000s, I was moody, angsty teen and I was approaching Linkin Park on the daily. And I'd be ashamed to admit that I kind of like Savage Garden and Craig David, and I had this very strange diet. But now I go back and listen to all these 2000s UK garage tracks, and they were absolutely astounding.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast.
Maybe I'm not coming at it from an educated point of view because, not only am I a man, I'm gay. I don't deal with pregnancy.
Are you?
And
have you ever told us that before?
I was trying to make a serious point.
Hey, we love you, you know that.
Yeah. But yeah, you've got a good point, Colin. This is a bit of a sausage fest episode. Maybe we should have got a lady involved.
The Movie Palace.
This is a film you'd seen before we decided to discuss these two. Is that right? This was a rewatch for you?
No, this was a first-time viewing. Bells of St. Mary's, I watched for the first time. last Christmas and really enjoyed it. And I had heard many things about the first one, especially how it had, swept at the Oscars, but I had never watched it. So when we started to discuss, a film to talk about for the holidays, I thought this is a great excuse to watch the first one.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.
We Are Starfleet is a podcast dedicated to Star Trek Discovery and how it relates to the story, ethos, and canon of Star Trek. Join your host, Mike Slammer, as he sits down with guests from all over the world to talk disco. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Starfleet Pod. Follow for more Star Trek podcasts such as The Sanctuary, a politics and economics of Star Trek pod, Rarely Going, a Star Trek Lower Decks podcast, and Make It So, a Star Trek Picard podcast. We Are Starfleet is produced as part of the We Made This network of podcasts. We Made This brings together popular culture podcasts around film, TV, music, and more that hopefully educate, excite, and don't take themselves too seriously. Check us out at www.wemadethispod.com. Original music composed and performed by Anthony Fuscaldo.